Hey there, you watch Bare Knuckle Binder, welcome to the channel. This is part 3 of a tractor video that I thought was going to be one video, maybe 30 minutes long, and it's turned into 3 videos at this point. Hopefully this is the last one. In the last video, I realized I ran out of time on this tractor in order to get it to the Badger Steam and Gas show up here in Wisconsin where I currently am at. And on top of that, life happened a bunch. Jess was flying in from Texas by way of Indianapolis. A bunch of snafus with the airlines happened, so I had a late night and a very early morning. I ended up just taking the 1945 M5H6 truck up to Baraboo for the show. I didn't even mess around with hauling tractors up there. It just worked out better. Had a great time, met some folks who watch the channel. It was super cool to meet them. Thanks for coming up and saying hi, by the way. And now I am back. I'm working on the M, and let me show you how far I've gotten. So I took a time lapse where I started to clean the block, and then just classic me, I got carried away and put the sleeves in. A little bit of ADD going on, but I started putting one in, and then I just went through and put all 4 of them in. I caught the first one on video doing a time lapse. Here it is. Going right in. First one went in pretty tight. These bores are tight, which is, I guess, good, but I was very worried about damaging or cracking a sleeve. I oiled all of them, and I also, on the last 3, I used the freezer method. And it did help a little bit, I will say that. But I did not use a block of wood and a hammer. I didn't do any of that stuff. I just used the puller. I got a longer piece of threaded rod and it pulled it straight down with the puller bushing. They're just proud enough of here that you can catch it with your nail. So I'm really happy with that. They look really good. They came with a crosshatch. I'm going to go through any type of dirt or particulate that is currently in the bores. I'm going to wash these out with soap and water. I'm going to wash out the rod journals on the crank. I'm just going through the checklist in my head. Once I get that stuff done, it's pretty much going to be time to start putting stuff together. I can hold off on cleaning the block again until I get the pistons in because there's going to be some residual oil on the block, so I don't need to double work that. So really, I need to clean the bores, clean the rod journals, clean the oil pan. Pop the pistons in, the rod bolts torqued. And once all that's done, lay down the head gasket after I treat it. I was gonna try some new gasket sealant that I've never used before, but it looks like I bought stock in copper coat. I have so many cans of copper coat that I think I'm just going to use it up before I try to start using new stuff. So I'm gonna use that on the head gasket and on the manifold gasket. And I need to, looking over there at the bench on the head, I need to lap the valves on the head. So that's gonna be, we've got several hours in this project yet to go. So I'm thinking the best next step here is to clean out these bores, clean out the rod journals, and drop these pistons in. Because I really don't need to clean the oil pan until I get all that stuff done when it's ready to go in. Yeah, let's do that. All right, so before I get into the time lapse, just wanted to mention real quick that the best way to clean out bores, things like that, when you're worried about like metal chips or anything like that, is to use hot soapy water. It lifts it out the best out of like grooves and whatever you might have. Like, there's also something I use for, when you clean out something like a freshly sleeved or honed brake cylinder. You want to get any type of metal particulate out with hot soapy water because it just lifts the metal particles out. And luckily, since I'm doing this up at my folks' house in Wisconsin, I think it's because my mom does so much baking and cooking and stuff. She likes to have really hot water. And so my parents' hot water heater is set to basically melt the skin off of a grapefruit. This stuff is like weapons grade hot water. It works out perfectly for this. I'm wearing a rubber glove because the hot water actually hurts my hands. It's so hot. So good stuff, and it's good for cleaning out these bores. So I'm just gonna go through and scrub these bores out, then I'll wipe them down real quick. And once I get them wiped down, I'll put grease a little bit of oil in there. It makes a lot of sense to occasionally dip the rag in the water, hopefully get anything that it picks up out of it kind of washed into the water, sinks to the bottom of the pan. You don't have to scrub it for hours, you just gotta take her through there. And luckily I don't have to hone these. This kit I ordered from Steiner, when I open these things up, they have a beautiful crosshatch in them, just perfect. And I have a ball hone that I use for breaking the glaze on stuff, but I don't have a real good stoned cylinder hone, or at least I thought I had one. I can't find it recently, but a lot of the stuff I've been doing has just been breaking glazes, and the ball hone is great for that. And actually I use the ball hone to clean the cylinder bores for the sleeves, and that really did a good job of cleaning out any rust and stuff in there. So I've got these bores, the cylinder's all washed out, and I just run a clean cloth rag through there just to dry it out. Try to leave as much soap in there as you possibly can to get a clean running engine. No, that's actually a bad joke. You don't want any of this stuff. Just get all the moisture out, and then I'll be coating these cylinders with some oil. I'm not too worried about flash rust. I'm going to be pumping pistons through here sooner than later. Now I'm going to go down below and do the same thing to the crankshaft journals, and then we're going to start dropping pistons in here. Alright. Now I've always just put these things, coated them in oil. I was putting this together. I saw a guy putting together an H motor the other day on YouTube, and he used assembly lube on this stuff. Why I never thought of that, I don't know, but I figured I'd try it. So that's what we're doing. Now, one thing that I have figured out over the years, if you don't have the little anything to keep this from nicking the sides, you can just wrap a rubber glove around it. So that's what we're going to do. That's what I've done here. Look at that. Now, there's one in there. How about it? I'm just going to go down the line here and put them in the same way. All the pistons and everything in. Let me get started on this head. Okay, so this is the head that apparently didn't have any cracks, but then looking at it, that really looks like a crack, and that really looks like a crack, but I guess if I pass the Magnaflux somehow, this is what we're working with. So you can see they surfaced it. I could definitely go through in here and clean it up some more, but they said the valves are trash. Clearly that does not look good. And of them look great. And that looks kind of junky. What I did last night before going in the house is I did a leak down test. And if you don't know the cheap way to do that, you just take some gas and you dump it in the combustion chambers here. And if it leaks down, the valves are bad, the valves are leaking. With compression and combustion in a working motor, if the gas isn't leaking out that fast, then you're pretty much okay. And obviously in a higher performance applications, you'd want to be a lot more sure about it. But anyway, I'm hoping I can get away with lapping these valves. I have to put this head on no matter what, because this is what I've got. It can leak down overnight or whatever, but if it leaks down fast enough to see it dribbling out, then you got a problem. You gotta have the tractor running by the time I leave here in a couple days. So what I'm gonna try to do is I'm gonna try to lap these valves, and I'm gonna show you how I do that. These ones did not leak down. These ones, the outer two did. And I think this is probably the worst one, but it means I need to get these ones open. So I got my valve spring compressor, so I've got to see if I can get these valves apart. Last night, I'm going to say as a disclaimer, last night I tried to get these valves apart and it seemed like the keys were actually rusted in there, which is not great. It's not a good start. So you don't want to be pounding on these valves and, you know, bend one or whatever. So let's see what we can do. As far as these ones are concerned, since they were not leaking down, I'm just going to leave them. I will go through with a small ball peen hammer and tap the ends of them just to make sure they're not stuck. If they're free and not leaking, then we're going to call it good. These ones, at least one of these two of each of these is leaking, so we're going to do our best to pull them apart and lap them. Anyway, I think I just repeated myself. Let's get after it. So just real quick, with a quick little taparooski. It's not a very small ball peen hammer like I said, but we'll give it some small taps. You can feel them flex underneath it. Obviously, it's hard to show that in a video, but you can actually feel them move. So the outside ones are the problems, and I don't know if it's the exhaust or the intake. Let's see what we can do here. Now, I tried to take these off last night, and the keys seem to be stuck, so I'm going to put a little bit of Freol on there. Well, couldn't put my hands on some Freol, so I found some Deep Creep, which was coincidentally my nickname in high school. Soak in there a little bit, take off the extra to keep the mess down. Maybe a little taparooski might help get in there. Maybe not, who cares? It felt like I was doing something, so it's pretty much the same thing. Let's see if we can't get those off of there. This is, it's nice to be able to have my dad's shop here to work on stuff, but sometimes it works against you because I don't have my tools here. So, okay, so the one is loose. Here's one. There's two. Oh man, what a pain. All right, let's take a look at this thing. Oof. Valve guide's tight. That's not super swell. Look at this garbage. So we got some stuff to deal with here. It's definitely not ideal. We're gonna pick up these valve keys before I lose them or step on them or both. All right, let's see what the valve seat looks like. So that's inside the chamber. It doesn't look great. Luckily that's exhaust, so most of that goes flying out, but we'll clean that up some. The valve seat itself doesn't look awful. Anyway, so let's get to lapping this. I'm going to clean that a little bit, and then I'll start lapping it. All right, so I've cleaned this out. I put a little bit of lubricant in here because you want some lubricant in that valve guide. You don't want to just, if it's dry, you don't want that valve guide to just get wallered out as you're lapping this thing, because you're going to be spinning it to lap it. Now, a really quick test that I do for the valve guide to make sure that there's not too much play in it, because you have to have a tight tolerance in the valve guide or else start burning a lot of oil. So one way to do that is push your finger up, push the valve up on the bottom with your finger, and then hold your finger over the valve guide. If you pull up, you should feel suction on your finger. Or another way to do it is to bring the valve out and just let it go down like that, because without it, it just pops down like that. Hold your finger over the end. Now it's sealed on the bottom, and you let the valve drop in there. It'll have that cushion of air from your finger sealing it off. So that tells you that there's enough of a seal that that valve guide is tight enough. Just a pillow of air taking her down. All right, so what I've done already is I cleaned out the inside here. I hit some deep creep in there and started taking out some more, blew it out with compressed air. Yeah, I keep running it down through there, and there's some dirt in the valve guide, which that is getting. I might take some pipe cleaner if I can find some. Like I said, I'm not in my shop, so I don't know where that stuff is. But it's getting there. We'll clean it out. So anyway, I also took the valve, and my dad's wire brush, his bench grinder with the wire brushes on it, it has a very fine wire brush side. You don't want to use really coarse. So I used a really fine side and just lightly took off a bunch of the corrosion that was on here. Now, this is clearly where the valve is seating. It looks like it's been lapped before. And I don't know if this is the one that's leaking on this side, but I don't want to really bear into this with a wire brush and get it uneven, or more uneven than it already might be. So all I was doing was just taking off the surface corrosion and just getting that out of the way, because that's not helping anything. The valve is now starting to look pretty decent. I mean, not great obviously, but I think it's something we can work with. So what I want to do now is get this thing ready to lap, which the entire principle of lapping a valve is putting it in its own seat, like so, and then putting a polishing compound or a valve grinding compound, valve lapping compound, and putting it in there and spinning it on itself, so it just kind of polishes its own seat. A fairly cheap way to make valves last a little bit longer without actually getting in there and grinding them. Now, to do that, the old school way of valve lapping machine is like a little suction cup that sticks on here and spins it in there. But you can do this without that little tool. I'd say it's fancy. It's really not that fancy. So this is the stuff I use for the valve lapping compound. And Permatex 836. Follow the directions in the back. Got to mix it with water. So it comes out of the tube like this, and you can put it on the valve just like that and start grinding it. But then to get a finer grit and smooth it out, you just add a little bit of water. And I want to get any excess oil out of the valve seat area. That's not helping anything when you're trying to polish this stuff smooth. Even use a little bit of mineral spirits to clean that out, because you don't want the oil getting in there. So the other way to do this without a valve lapping tool, with just stuff you have laying around the shop for free, is to find like a rubber hose, like a fuel line like this, one that will fit over the top of that valve, and one that you can stuff some type of tool that goes in a handheld drill. Now again, I'm going to oil this up. Not trying to get on the seat. I just want it on the stem, because you don't want there to be a bunch of wear on the valve guide. So then You just run her in there with that. And then on the back side, flip that hose over it. All right, so now she is on there. And basically what you do is you work it back and forth a little bit, slowly rotating it. And you bop it back and forth. I like to hold my finger on here. All right, been going for that for a little bit here. I want to add a little bit of water, like a drop or two, right on top of that valve, and that will start to smooth it out. A little more. All right, let's take a look at that. Starting to slowly shine up that surface, get it polished out. So it's just something you sit there and you do for a while. It takes a while to get this thing just right. So even if there's a trick to doing something on a motor, there's no real shortcuts. You have to take the time and do it right to get the results you want. So I'm gonna go through here. It's gonna be pretty boring to watch this on video. So I'm gonna go through this and I'll bring it back when we're about to put this head back on the motor. Oh God, got my hand stuck. Down she goes. Woo! These things are not getting any lighter. All right, now that I've got this on here, I realized I didn't mention this, and I have to mention this before I go any further. When I lap the valves on this thing, it's with the full intention that I'll be removing this head when I get the original head for the tractor back. If I was going to use this head permanently on here, I would have gone through and replaced all these valves, had new seats cut, all of that. This is just a temporary fix because I have to have this tractor going by the time I leave here in a few days. So that's the thing. It's a temporary fix. I would never run valves like that in a tractor that I was going to just bolt together and put back into full-time service. In other news, it is Thursday, which means I have to have this video done today, so I need to get this thing firing today because I can't go another week without y'all being able to hear this thing run, or at least watch me attempt to get it running. The other thing is that earlier this week, Monday morning, my dad went back into the hospital, and so he's been into town ever since in the hospital. A lot of you know what's going on with my dad right now. He's dealing with cancer and stuff, but he has an infection that kind of got the best of him for a minute. So I'm thinking maybe tomorrow and get this thing dialed up and running today, and either tomorrow, probably first thing tomorrow, I might try to drive this thing into town. Maybe I can get two birds that stoned at once, and the tires have fluid in them, and I want to take those in, the tractor itself into the tire shop in town and get the fluid sucked out of them before it destroys the rims. Now I know I could easily take the valve stems and open them up and squirt the fluid all over the driveway to keep the dust down, as people say, but my parents really aren't interested in that sort of thing, and so it's just easier to have have it removed at the tire shop in town. So anyway, time to start putting this head back together. I've got the breather lines, I got the thermostat housing that's got to go together. Obviously the head bolts have to go on it. And tightened down and torqued. Head bolts first, obviously. I left this one out. This is the one that the head stud, I don't know if you can see it from the camera there, but this is the head stud that broke. And so I got it all cleaned out and tapped out, but apparently the tap went a little weird because it's going in at an angle, and so the head wouldn't go on this thing, or even the head gasket would go on this thing without being askew. So it is what it is. I'm just gonna put it in once the head's on there like it is now. So anyway, that's where we're at. I'm gonna start putting the nuts on the head studs and go through it here and torque it down. In the meantime, I still have to get the manifold on here, obviously. That has to happen after this thing's torqued down. The oil pan's over there. It is a filthy mess. I gotta clean that all up. I want to prime the oil pump, which I do by stuffing Vaseline in it so that when it starts up, it's immediately sucking oil. Yeah, but we're in the home stretch right now, putting this thing back together. The head looks awkwardly cleaner than the rest of the motor. We're doing good. So let me get back to work. Well, it just feels like everything's slowing down to a crawl as I'm getting all this stuff put on here, time-lapsing some of it, just in a hurry to get it done. At this point, it's almost time to put this rebuilt beauty back on here, but I have to go through, because this head has been shaved. I don't know if shaved is the correct term for it, but it's been surfaced so that the mounting surface is flat. I've gone through, I have torqued down the head bolts. Now I'm gonna go through and set the valve lash, because that's all off, because this is not the original head. For one, the head's been shaved. It's got a lot of extra play. And then I can pull these off, put that bell crank on there. I still have to put the oil pan back on, get all that done and prime the pump. And looks like maybe some coolant stuff, but we're getting there. Okay, so I'm underneath the tractor now, and the GoPro was making some sounds like it's unhappy and running out of battery and all that. And since the top end is pretty much done, except for some coolant lines and fittings, thermostat, etc., I'm putting together the bottom now. Putting together the bottom, getting the oil pan and everything set. And I took the pickup tube off of the oil pump. And what I like to do with the oil pump at this point is to pack it full of Vaseline. And what that does is it primes the gears to pick up oil faster. Inside this oil pump here, there are 2 gears that mesh together, and as they go, it pumps oil through. And even if you don't take it apart, you can stuff Vaseline in here to the point that it will get in those gears, and it basically primes it. It seals up the open spaces in between the gears and starts sucking oil faster, which you want, obviously. So let's do it. Getting up in there. Once the motor's fired up and
the pump is primed and it picks up oil, this Vaseline just gets absorbed into the oil because it's petroleum jelly, don't you know? This Vaseline is also helpful for your tractor's overall well-being if it suffers from dry skin. I think that should be about enough. All right, that's done. Gonna put the pickup tube back on, clean it off a little bit, and put it back on and put the oil pan on. Well, got it all put together, got oil in it and everything. I still need to connect some coolant stuff, but with the ignition off, let me cycle it over and get some oil pressure. Saw the needle move a little bit, that's enough for me. Turn it on. Hey! Satisfactory. All right, so I have to go into town and grab hoses, short lengths of hoses, some 1.5 inch and some 2-inch hose, so I can get the coolant all connected. And then I had an alternator I bought for this, but I ended up using that alternator I bought for this thing for the Army truck, the M5H6, before we took it up to the show in Baraboo, because the other one had been making noise. I took it apart and it was full of bug carcasses. That's a first for me. But anyway, so I have to get an alternator for this, and I have to get some hoses, and then we should be off to the races. It should be good to go. Okay, well, she runs pretty well. We've got some problems with coolant leaks. This seam right here is leaking, and then the bolt, the head stud that I had to ream out, apparently it opened up the threads and it's leaking out of that. So I used some ultra black on this. I didn't put it on very thick, so apparently maybe the housing's a little iffy, whatever. So really the best stuff for that I find is the ultra blue silicone. So I'm thinking I'll probably get some of that, drain the coolant down. I'll probably just put thread tape on this one to seal that up. That usually is the best way to get threads to seal, and then I'll have to retorque that, whatever. But for the most part, this thing runs well. I don't want to take it too far right now because obviously you don't want to press the coolant issue, and also there's no alternator on it. This is a tractor that had the Bosch alternator on it off of Volkswagen, I believe. That Bosch is a smaller alternator with a smaller footprint, so I'm actually saving it for the H, and I'm going to put a 10 SI on here. I'm going to do the classic 12 volt conversion on this tractor and show how it's actually supposed to be done. If you use a Delcotron alternator, which would be a Delco 10 SI or 12 SI, there's a trick to it, and in the 90s, the whole way to do it, that people tried to make it a one wire, which actually is more of a 2-wire. I can't wait to get rid of this temp gauge. It doesn't even work. It's just plugging that hole. Anyway, the 90s way of doing a 12 volt conversion on a farm tractor, there's a problem I've always had with it, and I'm going to make a video as I put the alternator on this thing. And I'll explain why this worked and how it worked, or why it was, functioning how it was. We'll rewire this whole tractor. Can't wait to pull these wires. And then I noticed how special this is. Instead of actually putting bolts on there, they just bent them over. So that's special. So anyway, I mean, at least it runs. It's got great oil pressure and runs like a nose. It's just leaking coolant. Obviously, it's leaking coolant at the top here because I didn't put a cap on it. But you know, that's neither here nor there. So that one's a pretty easy one to fix. I'll just put the cap on it. But that said, I'm going to put a cap on this video and end it right here. Finally got the tractor running right. It has power. It likes to move around. Now I just got to address these leaks, rewire the tractor, and she'll be good to go. So anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.